We see the golden masks, the majestic pyramids, the serene gods with animal heads. We imagine ancient Egypt as a cradle of civilization, a kingdom of sunlight and monumental achievement. But this is a carefully constructed illusion. Beneath the gilded coffins and the sacred hieroglyphs lies a dark obsession, a primal terror that shaped their entire world. The famous Book of the Dead was not a holy text. It was a book of cheat codes for a terrifying journey through an underworld filled with monsters and demons. Today, we do not admire the tomb. We break the seal and step inside. Introduction. Welcome to the Veiled Chronicles. For 3,000 years, the Egyptian civilization prospered on the banks of the Nile, but their society was not built to celebrate life. It was engineered to conquer death. In the Egyptian world view, life on Earth was merely a brief, troublesome prelude to the main event, a perilous and eternal journey through the afterlife. To survive it, they developed a series of bizarre, grotesque, and sexually charged rituals that have been sanitized by modern history. Today, we unveil the forbidden truths of the world's most sophisticated death cult. Section 1. The gruesome art of mummification. The process of mummification is famous, but the clean, bandaged mummies we see in museums hide a disgusting reality. It was a brutal, invasive, and grotesque procedure. The process began not with reverence, but with desecration. The embalmer's first task was to remove the brain. Using a long iron hook inserted through the nostrils, they would violently whisk the brain into a liquid pulp, which would then drain out through the nose. Any remaining tissue was dissolved with powerful drugs. They believed the brain was worthless, the seat of mere emotion. The true essence of a person, their intelligence and soul, resided in the heart. The heart was the only major organ deliberately left inside the body, for it would be needed for the final judgment. The other organs, the liver, lungs, stomach, and intestines, were removed through a deep incision in the abdomen. They were washed, dried, and stored in 4 sacred containers called canopic jars, each protected by one of the 4 sons of the god Horus. The now empty body cavity was then sterilized with palm wine and packed with a natural salt called natron. The entire corpse was buried in a pile of this salt for 40 days until every drop of moisture was violently pulled from the skin, muscles, and bones, leaving behind a shrunken, skeletal husk. Only then could the final artistic phase begin, the wrapping. Hundreds of yards of linen were used to bandage the body, a painstaking process that could take weeks. Between the layers, the priests would place dozens of magical amulets, each one a specific spell of protection against the demons of the underworld. The final result was not just a preserved body, it was a magical weapon, an enchanted vessel designed for a supernatural war. Section 2. The Final Judgment and the Devourer of Souls. The entire purpose of this gruesome preparation was to face a single, terrifying moment, the weighing of the heart. After death, the soul of the deceased, known as the Ba, would be guided by the god Anubis into the Hall of Two Truths. There, before 42 divine judges, the ultimate trial would take place. The deceased's heart was placed on one side of a great golden scale. On the other side was a single ostrich feather, the feather of Mayat, the goddess of truth and justice. The deceased then had to recite the negative confession, declaring their innocence of 42 specific sins. I have not stolen. I have not killed. I have not lied. If the heart was pure and light, it would balance perfectly with the feather. The soul would be declared true of voice, and granted entry into the eternal paradise of the field of reeds. But if the heart was heavy with the sins of life, the scale would tip. This is where the true Egyptian horror lies. The punishment was not an afterlife in a fiery hell. It was something far worse, total annihilation. Waiting beside the scales was a monstrous creature, the goddess Ammit, the devourer of the dead. With the head of a crocodile, the torso of a lion, and the hindquarters of a hippopotamus, Ammit would devour the sinful heart, and in doing so, erase the soul from existence forever. To the Egyptians, this second death was the ultimate terror, an absolute end from which there was no return. Section 3. Forbidden sexuality in the afterlife. While their view of judgment was terrifying, the Egyptian vision of paradise was surprisingly carnal. They believed the afterlife was an idealized version of their life on the Nile, and that included all physical pleasures. Fertility, desire, and sexual intercourse were considered essential for a happy eternity. This belief is explicitly depicted in their hidden art. The tomb of a noble named Carey, for example, contains a painted harp with a shockingly explicit image of the musician engaging in a sexual act with a priestess. In the famous Turin erotic papyrus, we see a series of vignettes depicting men and women in various acrobatic sexual positions, often with a humorous and unrestrained energy. This wasn't pornography. It was a magical guarantee. By depicting these scenes, they believed they were ensuring the deceased would be able to enjoy an eternity of sexual pleasure. This obsession was rooted in their most important myth, the story of the god Osiris, who was murdered and dismembered by his jealous brother, Set. His wife, Isis, reassembled his body but could not find his phallus, which had been eaten by a fish. She magically fashioned a new one and, in the form of a bird, hovered over his revived body to be impregnated, later giving birth to their son, Horus. This story placed sexuality, even necrophilic and magical sexuality, at the very heart of their concept of resurrection and eternal life. Section 4. The power of curses and black magic. The Egyptian world was saturated with magic, or Heka. It was not a fringe practice, it was the physics that governed their universe. Heka was the power the gods used to create the world, and it could be harnessed by priests and even common people through rituals and spells. This magic was a double-edged sword. It could be used for healing and protection, but it could also be weaponized. The famous Curse of the Pharaohs is a modern myth, but it is born from a very real practice. Tombs were not just resting places, they were vaults filled with treasures intended for the afterlife. To protect them from robbers, priests would inscribe terrifying curses on the tomb walls. The tomb of the Vizier Ankh-Mahor, for example, contains a threat. As for any man who shall enter this tomb, judgment shall be made against him. I shall seize his neck like a bird. I shall cast the fear of myself into him. These curses were meant to invoke supernatural protectors and unleash demons upon any who dared disturb the dead. But the magic wasn't just for the dead. Egyptians used curse tablets and bound effigies to harm their enemies in life. A jilted lover might create a small clay figure of their rival, write their name on it, and then pierce it with needles while reciting a spell, believing it would cause them real physical harm. Magic was a practical and often terrifying tool of everyday life. Section 5. The industrialization of animal sacrifice. The Egyptians' reverence for animals is well known. Gods like Anubis, Horus, and Bastet had animal heads. But this worship had a dark and bloody side. A common form of prayer was to offer a mummified animal to the god it represented. To meet the demand, a massive industrial-scale industry of animal breeding and sacrifice emerged. Archaeologists have discovered vast catacombs containing not thousands, but millions of mummified animals. At Saqqara, a necropolis for sacred animals, there are tunnels packed to the ceiling with the mummified remains of ibises, falcons, and baboons. Many of these animals, especially cats, were not revered pets who died of old age. Scans of their mummies reveal they were bred in huge temple-run farms, similar to modern puppy mills, and then killed at a young age, often by having their necks snapped, specifically to be mummified and sold as offerings to pilgrims. It was a dark, commercialized slaughter, a holy industry built on the ritualistic killing of millions of creatures. Conclusion. The golden treasures of Tutankhamun and the serene gaze of the Sphinx present a vision of a confident and eternal civilization. But this is only half the story. The veiled chronicles of ancient Egypt reveal a culture motivated by a profound fear of the dark, a fear of being judged, of being devoured, of being forgotten. Their magnificent temples, their grotesque rituals, their intricate spells, and their golden tombs were all just pieces of an elaborate suit of armor, built to protect a fragile soul on its terrifying journey through the forbidden darkness of the afterlife.